would you like to tell us about your second birth, which was also a home birth?
Yes. So the second one, I think I was like, oh yeah, I already know how this is gonna be because I had, I'd already had a home birth, and I was already. So I did the pretty much other than taking a prenatal class, it was the same type of prep. So I did the same amount of acupuncture. I did perineal, like I went to pelvic floor physiotherapist. I had the same birth support. My midwife at the time kept telling me that the second birth is really, really fast. And in my head, I was like, oh, whatever. Like, I'm like, how fast can it be? Because I just assumed it would be 12 hours. I cut it in half. And I'd done a little bit of research on second births, and I was like, oh, it'll be 12 hours. That's like, it totally wasn't. I ended up having, I think it was like 4.5 hours. Like it was, and it shocked me. So it was a completely different experiences. It was.
And your first birth was 23, so
yeah.
And then this one was 4.
Yeah, and I was like, I ended up, I thought I would lose like my mucus. I think I was a bit more, because I'd already given birth, I was overly familiar with the sensations. So I waited too long to be like, to call, like I was minimizing it. I'm just like, oh, and I thought I'd have to lose my mucus plug because that's what happened the first time. And then, the first time I had to take castor oil too to start because my baby, I was so determined on having a home birth. I went 42 weeks and like 3 days, and I had to take castor oil. I was refusing to get induced, so I did the castor oil induction, and it worked really well for me. But this time, so because of that, I was like, oh, my baby's gonna be late. But I went into, like, it was like action, like probably like the day after her due date. So it was like just on time. And then I went to sleep, and I was sleeping at night, and I'm like, I was having a hard time. I was having back pain, and I just thought, oh, this is just Braxton Hicks the whole time. And because I'm like, I haven't lost my mucus plug yet. And then I went downstairs at like 4 a.m. to have cereal, and I'm like, I'm not gonna wake up my husband. I realized I was in labor at that point because it was obvious it wasn't Braxton Hicks, and I'm like, I'm just gonna have cereal. It was literally like chill. I was like, stopping in the middle of the stairs every minute or so to breathe. And then I didn't even call my partner, and he came down normally because he wakes up like an hour, and he's like, you look like intense. And I couldn't sit on the chair eating cereal, and I was trying, like, it took me, he's like, I think I need to call the midwife. I was like, no, let's get a contraction timer, because I thought it was gonna take longer. And he's like, you can't breathe. Like, you actually can't talk when you're breathing. So we did those contraction timers, and it kept saying go to the hospital because the contractions were so close together. And I was like, no, it's not that bad. It's kind of funny when you think about it. But whereas if that was the first time, I would have not have had that reaction, right? So my tolerance was a little too high. So then the midwife, we called her, and she's like, okay, I'm going to be there in an hour or two, like however long. Like, I'll be there in an hour and a half. And I'm like, what? She's like overreacting. My husband went to drop the dog off and my son off at my mom's, and he barely made it in time for the birth. So we set up. So he came back, my friend came, and the midwife came, and I went upstairs to go poop. And I thought, like, and when my midwife came, she checked how dilated I was, because I could barely talk, and I was almost fully dilated. The second birth was way more intense because it was so fast. It was actually more difficult. It was way more difficult. And I used the TENS machine the whole time, but I wasn't able to have a water birth. We had to give birth in the bed because we didn't have time to set it up. It was like so intense. It was really intense because it was really, really fast. So what happened in 23 hours happened in like 4. So it was, I think with this, like, short births are seen to be maybe better and preferable, but I think the actual longer one was a bit more bearable. If I was in the hospital, I would have had an epidural because it was too intense. But it's one of those things, the same thing, once you transition, it's like, yeah, whatever, that's over. Oh, great. Like, and I remember when she came, I think I was, how dilated do you have to get? Is it, how many centimeters? 10? Yeah, I think I was 8 centimeters dilated already before the midwife got there. And I remember when she said it, I was like kind of elated because I'm like, oh my God, I've already almost fully dilated. And I did it mostly by myself. So it was in this way, there's a relief.
Mm-hmm. How did you feel emotionally through the whole thing? After?
That's the other thing. My first one, I was more out of it because I realized now I was tired. Whereas this one, I felt very conscious because it was so fast. I had mostly a good night's sleep because didn't realize I was in labor. Like, so I'd had a good night's sleep. It was like literally four. It was like 4:30 or something, and I gave birth at like 8:30, and I was, and nobody tells you that you're gonna poop the first time because the castor oil was cleaned out, but the second time you're like, oh, this is weird. The second time I thought I was literally had to go to the bathroom, and my midwife, I'm like, why are you following me around? She goes, because I think you actually have to give birth, not really go to the bathroom.
Yeah, because it feels the same.
It feels
like
the
the
same.
baby's head
It feels the
like
same. It feels the same.
Yeah.
It's because it's pushing up against your rectum too.
Yeah,
And then it was the same thing, but my daughter actually cried. It was so cute. It was really cute. And I had so much more energy. I felt very, very present for the whole birth. Like, I was actually fully talking during my like in between contractions, like asking people how they're doing. Like, I was way more conscious. Like, even in between pushing, it was intense. But like having my birth supports and stuff helped. And I used the TENS machine even during I think it was more of a distraction. It was a distraction. And then it happened so fast. I was really conscious, and I wasn't tired after.
Yeah.
So I was a bit more present with her.
Yeah.
Yeah, and even the whole idea of a big baby. Like, my daughter was, I think she was 8.5 pounds or something. So it's like you can't give birth, and I didn't even tear.
Mm-hmm.
Like, those were my goals.
Oh, what position were you in when she was born?
Like, hands and knees,
a
bit of squatting, and then hands and like kind of like angle, like an angle.
Mm-hmm.
Is that right? Yeah. And same with my son. It was squatting and then on an angle.
Mm-hmm.
It was an angle, like a side, like
hands
you're
and knees,
floating,
leaning.
Yeah, leaning,
kneeling.
Leaning. Yeah, hands and knees leaning. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so cool.
What was your husband's experience?
He was better during the second one. I think I had done a lot of preparation to get ready to have a child.
Yeah.
And I think he was like, oh my God, I'm going to be a dad. He kind of behaved like those, like on those like TV shows where they're like the whole support team has to help the dad have his like process.
Yeah.
The first time it was a bit like that.
Yeah.
The second time he was really supportive.
Okay, what did he do that you found helpful?
He did everything in the background.
Mm-hmm.
Like he had the water birth, I didn't want him around emotionally because he was irritating me. So it helped to have my my actual like friend or like who was like a doula. Like that was more my birth support. But the second time he was actually like emotionally able to be present. He had a hard time. Like I told him, I'm like, you didn't have to watch the baby being pushed out of a vagina. And he couldn't get the image out of his head. And I'm like, well, I never told him. I wouldn't want to see that. That's the funny thing. I actually am not into bloods and gore, but I gave a home birth, and I'm like, okay, yeah, it's done. Cool. I did that. Yay.
Yeah.
It was like I wouldn't want to go watching babies being pushed out of vaginas either. So it took a while for him to recuperate from that.
It's too funny.
It is funny, but it's all natural.
So, thinking back to your two births, what would you say were the worst parts and what were the best parts?
The transition.
For both of them.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The best parts were being able to birth at home because I was more relaxed.
Yeah, more relaxed.
It was really nice to be in your own environment.
Mm.
It was really, really, really relaxing, and to have a good birth team supporting me.
Yeah,
I don't think I would have had as positive birth experiences if I hadn't done so much prep and had a good team.
And when you say transition was the worst, like what were the kinds of thoughts and emotions you were having in transition?
Oh my God, I was like, what the fuck is this? What the fuck? Like, this is like, who does this? Like, it was so awful. It was so intense. And screaming. I think you get a more primal. You get more primal.
Yeah, it's not screaming like on TV.
No, it's just more
vocalizing.
Like primal. It's vocalizing.
Sounds, yeah.
Sound like, ah!
Yeah.
Funny, but it's like vocalizing.
Yeah.
But it helps because it gets out the emotions.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Great. Is there any advice you have for
I think it's the same thing. Like, I think it's Like, I wouldn't listen to bad births. I think it's becoming aware of birth before. Oh, and becoming aware of breastfeeding. Breastfeeding was way more difficult than giving birth in some ways. Like, and researching and learning different techniques before, so that you go into birth like fully aware of all your options.
Yeah.
And researching, like, even if you plan to have a hospital birth, it's helpful to learn about all the natural strategies, because it gives you more control over your body.
Yeah.
And more awareness of what can happen.
And do you have any advice for moms for like postpartum, and like what is, life with a newborn?
I'd recommend working with a midwife over personally. I had good experiences with my midwives. For postpartum, not letting people come to your house right away. Like waiting a couple weeks, and like making sure you have support and having people around you to do all the basic things.
So you mean like have like people that are supportive come and help you, but not have like visitors that are not going to be helping. They're just coming to see the baby.
Tell them to wait a few weeks. And then being gentle, like taking care of yourself. It's helpful to learn about breastfeeding before. Yeah. Because it's not natural.
Well, it is natural, but
it's not like pop the baby on your boob and here it is. Like, we had a hard time with it. Like, so it's important, I think, to read about all of that before, and then not judge yourself if you're having trouble. Like, it's okay to use formula. My kid's 7. He doesn't remember if he was breastfed or give formula. Like, I get it's beneficial, obviously, but like having supports in place.
So
not
prepping
isolating.
for birth and prepping for breastfeeding
and how to take care of a baby, like basic things. I think people with breastfeeding. And not forcing schedules on your kids, like sleep schedules and stuff, and recognizing that the newborn phase is hard, but at like 2 or 3 months your kid starts to naturally, like, babies change, right? So expecting that the first 3 months is going to be like the 4th trimester, basically. It is the 4th trimester. Your body's recovering. Postpartum is real. Like, it's like, there's all these things happening to your body, and that your baby's like
emotional ups and downs, like really intense.
They're intense.
And not to be expecting that you're going to go back to like normal life, at least till after like 3 months. Then you kind of
then you can go out more, like you're feeling physically ready. So having TV shows that you want to watch lined up is helpful. So like, because I was sitting there feeding. Even if you're not breastfeeding, you're feeding, right? And you're doing a lot of sitting and feeding
12 times a day
for the first like 3 months. So having like I binge watched Downton Abbey.
That's your advice, and that's the final word from Parm.
Yes, I binge watched from beginning to end, and then my son stopped being a newborn. That's literally what happened.
Okay, thank you so much for sharing your stories.
You're welcome.